Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I'm Rain Musni. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. Overseas Filipino workers play a vital role in the Philippine economy, with remittances reaching a record high of $34.5 billion in 2024, marking a 3% increase from the previous year. However, recent discussions surrounding a proposed zero remittance day or week protest have sparked debates on its potential economic impact and the broader implications for OFWs and their families. Joining us today on Follow the Money is Michael Ricafort, Chief Economist at Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, or RCBC, to provide insights into these developments. Michael, thank you so much for joining us, and good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rain, and to your viewers, and nice to be back. Well, after a while. Thank you.
Right, we appreciate you being with us. Now, the proposed Zero Remittance Day protest by OFWs could be a week as well. What immediate impact could this have on the Philippine economy, considering remittances account for 8.3% of GDP in 2024?
Well, true, Rain. Those are the statistics. Even the population of OFWs, that's consistent, about 10% of the total population. But the thing is, those coming from Europe, the remittances there, if we break it down, for all remittances coming from continental Europe is around 11% of the total. Out of which, further breakdown, those coming from European Union is around 6%. There's a need for them to continually send money to their families, to their dependents, their relatives here in the country. So it's really pretty hard to really stop. Although, yeah, fine. If you had to do a simulation, for the month of January alone, based on the latest data, the total remittances for a given month from Europe is around $300 million out of the 2.9 billion total. And that's about 11%. And from European Union alone, from EU, the total is around $150 million per month. So you divide it by 4. So assuming, this is just simply doing the math.
Yeah.
For EU, you divide by 4, 300 divided by 4, that's around, approximately $70 million per week. And for EU alone, it would be half of that, around $35 million. However, not everyone of course, not everyone there would participate, because there are various reasons, because their views might be diverse. Not everybody's on the same page when it comes to political inclinations. Some may be apolitical or non-partisan, and even those who may share the same sentiment, because of the exigencies, the urgencies to send money here locally, so some of them may not participate. So therefore, given those figures, the effect could be minimal and manageable for the meantime. However, it's still a wait and see mode. To see, because GAB already wait and see if indeed the effects would be kind of manageable. But we have to note the fact that would be hardest hit by these. It would be the families, the recipients, more than anybody else. Whatever economic impact may be secondary. Of course, what would be sent, those are for basic necessities like food, shelter, utilities like electricity, water, internet data, or phone bill, because they have deadlines, so they have to be paid. And also rent, housing costs like mortgages or related costs to housing. And realistically, there may be some expenditure items that may be adversely affected, like beyond the basic necessities or the needs. It would be the wants. The wants meaning, especially those with surplus who can afford to do so, to participate. well, it could adversely affect spending, say, on discretionary items like shopping, travel, leisure, and so on. So, yeah, there may be some impact. But realistically, yes, if the plan is for a 1 week pause in sending remittances. So, however, if you go beyond that, from the point of view of the recipients, yeah, they would feel that. And especially by nature, if it would be the wife or the husband or the spouse, the children, the parents or grandparents, and so on. So, yeah, they would be hit hard, especially those with limited resources and budgets. Those
But
especially,
of course,
go ahead, Ping.
Of course, Mike, if supposing that they are doing this as a political protest, and supposing that their families here at home share the same political affiliations or inclinations, then they would probably understand. Nevertheless, you have a senior government official, a former senator, in fact, warning that participating in this protest could lead to the loss of tax incentives for OFWs. How might this affect the livelihoods of our overseas workers?
Well, yeah, there are many considerations, Rain, true. Of course, other than the necessities, the urgencies of sending money, and of course, over implications with regards to the law, especially local laws. So, well, uh, that would really compel, so to speak, the continuous sending of remittances, the combination of those factors. And, it's really hard to tell. It's really incumbent, it's really a deliberate choice by those remitting the OFWs on whether or not to send. No, it's really their prerogative. And it won't be that noticeable actually if you come to realize it also, no? That they may send more, they may send less, or they may not send at all. So it's really their choice. Oh, yeah, of course, it depends on implications of if that would be covered by law more than anything else. But the thing is, who would feel the pinch? Who would feel the brunt? It's really the recipients more than anything else. And whatever the effects on the economy would appear to be secondary already. And yeah, there are expenditure items that are urgent also, other than the basic necessities like education related, for healthcare, especially for emergencies, and
And especially,
medicine.
do you think
Yeah,
that perhaps, Mike,
that
this kind of protest movement affecting remittances might affect the decision of the Philippine Central Bank when it comes to cutting interest rates?
well, maybe the adverse effect may be minimal for now or manageable for now based on the data. But the thing is, yeah, if it would slow down, of course, the reality is on the ground. If, yeah, say, well, Philippines being consumer driven, if the recipients, the beneficiaries of these remittances, if that would mean reduced spending on say their spending on groceries, on markets and for stores, yeah, some companies, some businesses would feel reduced. Well, they would feel the adverse effects in terms of reduced sales and reduced business on their part, and that would be the immediate impact. There might be some drag on economic activities and growth as a result. So yeah, that could be part of the consideration, but we have yet to see if say well, would the participants be just confined in, say, in Europe or in EU, or would it also involve others, and other host countries around the world? So there's still a lot of variables to consider. But yeah, nonetheless, yeah, it's still there. It's part of the equation. Although it could just be a bit. It could just be, well, not too much. It's minimum to quantify how much of those would even participate, given the exigencies and the nature of, well, the need to constantly send remittances to the dependents. Because, yeah, the families, they would be the ones who would really suffer immediately. It's not really
Understood.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
the business would be secondary.
Mike, if for example, all things being equal, and if it is true, let's say all OFWs for that particular week decided not to remit any money back to the Philippines, then, that would be about $70 million in remittances, you were saying that, it could be equal to. It's still a little bit of the decline that remittances saw in January 2025. That's 13.6% month-on-month decline from 3.38 billion to 2.92 billion. This, of course, they were saying, a lot of economists, analysts have been saying that this is normal for January. But when would a drop in remittances become alarming?
So far, Rain, true. There are seasonality factors. That's expected. Actually, it's even below 1%. It's like a little less than 1%. So remittances growth are like 3 times faster than I think the latest population growth is around 0.9%. So yeah, it's still 3 times. So yeah, the key barometer here, if suddenly OFW remittances on a year-on-year bit eliminate the cyclicality. Like, of course, at Christmas, there's a seasonal rush. If it falls below 3%, so that would be already a signal that it's slowing down. Say if it goes close to 2% or even less.
All right, we're going to have to take a break right here. But when we come back, we're still going to be with RCBC's chief economist, Michael Ricafort. But do stay with us. Stay on Follow the Money. Welcome back to Follow the Money. We're still with RCBC Chief Economist Michael Ricafort. Mike, with inflation projected to fall below 2% in March this year, how might this affect consumer spending and the overall economy?
Well, that's favorable, Rain, fundamentally. If inflation is benign, well, it's possible for the month of March, it could even be below the BSP's inflation target of 2 to 4%. So that's good news. Meaning to say, if it's even below the lower end of the BSP's target, all the more, this the urgency to cut rates. And they have been doing monetary easing. They have reduced already reserve requirement ratio. That's effective March 28. They decided it more than a month ago, February 21. They cut it by 200 basis points for large banks to 5%. And the total reserve cuts would effectively infuse about 330 billion pesos into the banking system. Meaning to say, they used to be in reserves like a reserve tire. Now, banks may use them to increase their lending activities primarily. And they have the option also to choose from the balance sheet, also to increase their investment book by way of the alternatives to lending is investing in bonds, whether government or corporate bonds, where they would also earn, as well as other fixed income instruments, government securities, and other investments. So yeah, and the Fed has cut a total of 100 basis points since last year, since the rate cutting cycle started, and the BSP only cut 75 basis points. So in terms of interest rate differential, there's still leeway to, well, at least to make it the same as the Fed, total of 100 basis points by cutting 25 basis points come the next rate-setting meeting on April 10. And that has been sufficiently signaled and reiterated over the past month or two. And for the year, possible to have total cuts of between 50 basis points to 75 basis points. So that would be consistent also with the merging consensus in the U.S. Even the Fed futures are pricing that 2 to 3
but we're still quite a way from the interest rates of the U.S. There seems to have been a divergence already there. But do you see these low inflation rates sustaining until the end of the year?
Well, possible, Rain. In fact, the average for the year could be below 3%. It could range, well, for now, if this pace continues, primarily because of better weather conditions. We don't have much weather disruptions since the start of the year. It's a stark contrast to what we saw towards the end of last year, the series of storms, typhoons, and shear lines flooding that led to higher food, especially vegetable prices. Now it's the the reverse of that. We have seen already the better weather conditions, bumper or surplus harvests. That's manifested by the sharp decline in tomato prices and maybe in other vegetable prices. Give it a few weeks, a few months, harvest time after the planting season. So there will be the supply, and primarily also because of non-monetary measures like since July, the reduction in the import tariff on imported rice from 35% to 15%. That's an outright 20% discount since early July. And also the world price of rice has been lingering at the lowest levels in more than 3 years, since November of 2021. So, rice accounts for nearly 9% of the inflation basket. So that's the primary driver, together with better weather conditions, the increasing the supply of agricultural products, the crops. Of course, there's still La Nina expected to end until the first quarter of this year. There would still be ample rainfall, contrasting it to the El Nino last year. And normally, if there's rainfall, that's favorable to the supply of agricultural products in terms of productivity, increased harvest. So that's the main reason. And the peso is also relatively stronger, among the strongest levels in 5 months. It's October at 57 levels. It's coming from 59 levels. Last time we saw that was in November and December, and in January close to 59. Now it's at 57 levels. So that's an appreciation of between 2 to 3%. So
right.
That would reduce importation costs and would still continue to support benign inflation.
All right. You mentioned several things there. I want to take them apart one by one, but perhaps let's start with Treasury bonds. Of course, the recent arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte has led to an increase in Treasury bond rates. What does this signal about investor sentiment and the country's political stability, though?
Well, so far, the political noises that we have seen for more than 2 weeks already remain to be manageable, for as long as they remain to be political noises, just at that. Meaning to say, there's no risk of disruptions or distractions in terms of the government fulfilling its priority reform measures, especially those legislative reform measures, and doing its priorities per se. And well, so far we have seen, well, the bond yields, it maybe pick up a bit, but we have to consider it's also largely due to external factors. Like we have seen the 10-year Treasury yield, the benchmark, correcting higher to near 1-month highs lately. Although it's slow and gradual, we have seen also the dollar correcting higher to 3-week highs lately, as well as the world oil prices, because everybody is anticipating April 2. That's a key date. The Trump administration they're proposing this reciprocal tariffs, and yeah, that's a main driver. Because why? We're in an environment of rate cuts since last year. Now, those are the key competing factors. Yeah, rate cuts. The markets are pricing 50 to 75 basis points cut this year. It's reiterated in the Fed plot of 50 basis points cut this year, 50 basis points cut in 2026 rather, and another 25 basis points cut by 2027. So that's a total of 1.25 percentage points cut. The thing that would offset that would be the higher tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs and other protectionist measures, because they're going to lead to some pickup in U.S. inflation. Although they're kind of careful with that, knowing that the inflationary impact, because higher U.S. inflation, and of course that would be combined with slower global economic growth if there are trade wars. In the first Trump administration, it was just purely China. Now, more countries, even allies, Mexico, Canada, and China again, and threat of more countries. The reciprocal tariffs, that would be April 2. That would be practically every country that has import tariffs on U.S. imports. So that the U.S. would match that.
All right.
And so it would be a trade war. And then,
Mike?
so that would be stagflation.
So you mentioned two things there. Would you then consider the reciprocal tariffs looming this April 2nd as the single biggest threat to the economic standing and economic conditions of the Philippines. That's number one. And second, there are recent reports that indicate that the peso closed basically flat year to date, while the stock market slumped amid worries about reciprocal tariffs expected to be announced by the United States next week. How should investors interpret these developments? If I'm not mistaken, if I'm looking at the correct figures, the peso is about zero. It has only changed about 1 centavo since the start of the year. And the Philippine Stock Exchange is down about 1.18%. Is that correct?
Well, now, Rain, well, the peso is almost steady, true, at 57.70 levels. We have seen, at least for the previous 2 weeks, it has been confined most of the time between 57.20 to 57.30 levels. So that's up by at least 40 centavos since then. And at least, well, the world is watching the impact of those tariffs. Why? Because if there's some pickup in U.S. inflation, and we have seen already some cautiousness by Fed officials, because as early as December, they already reckoned that the total Fed rate cuts this year, as estimated by the Fed officials themselves through the Fed.plot, is only 50 basis points. The prior estimate before the Trump factor, it was 100 basis points cut. So it was cut in half. And they reiterated it again during the latest meeting last March 19. It would just be 50 basis points cut this year, 50 basis points cut next year, and 25 basis points cut by 2027. So if there would be fewer Fed rate cuts, so yeah, that would be the impact of which would be, around the world, including ours, we would have, that would be matched by the other central bankers around the world, including locally. So there would be fewer rate cuts down the road. So, yeah, and we have seen some, some healthy upward correction in the dollar. Though, the big picture is, if distinguishing the trees and the forest, the big picture since last year, the dollar has been on a, downward correction. Meaning to say, the dollar index is still among the lowest in 4.5 months. The yen is still among the lowest also in about 3.5 months. Oil is among the lowest in 3 months. And the 10-year treasury yield is among the lowest in 3.5 months also. So that's a bigger picture. But just this week, we saw some slight upward correction, most of which are corrected higher to their highest levels in 3 weeks. So this is just a small correction, hopefully, that it's still a wait and see, because, of course, the Trump administration, they're also cautious. In fact, there are already signs of softness in the sense that they have not been that firm and harsh when it comes to raising tariffs outright. They have been delaying a bit, and they're coming up with exemptions and other compromises and concessions. So, yeah, it's not really absolute in that sense. That would temper somewhat any pickup in prices, because they would be very careful with that. That's a problem that they're trying to solve they're trying to contrast it in the previous administration in the US.
And so, Mike, as an investor, considering all these highs and lows, all the rhetoric and pronouncements coming out of the U.S., would you just ride the waves then? Buy whenever there's negative news, and then sell whenever there's positive news?
Well, it's like, that's the normal market, that's a rational market reaction. Meaning to say, there's still uncertainty, some question marks. So it's rational for some market players to hedge their positions also. True, because it's bound in a range in that sense. So whenever there's, near the lower part of the range, some accumulation there, and because of the uncertainties, of course, even the Fed officials are acknowledging that there may be some, they're still on a wait-and-see mode, right? Because they have yet to see the actual data. So true, until the dust settles, everything becomes clear. So there's some tentativeness in that sense, that range trading around the world. In fact, in the U.S.
Do you, as an economist, feel that this uncertainty is also, affecting all of your recommendations? Is it harder to put an outlook on the peso and the PSEI at the moment, And would there be some recommended investment vehicles or some sectors to put your money in at the moment?
Well, through Rain, if you look at the market dynamics, given the volatility in the stock market, say in the U.S., they just came from 6-month lows, but now they have picked up to the highest levels in 2 to 3 weeks, and they're still among the lowest in 4.5-month lows, though. And locally, our stock market is came from 1.5-month highs early this month, and now it's trading at the lowest in about 2 weeks. But now it's towards the close. It's slightly higher, a few points higher. And if you look at it well, yes, the volatility in the equities market somewhat benefited fixed income in the sense that the yields are still near cycle highs, meaning to say there's still opportunity. There's still the flight to the safety of this the safest fixed income instruments like the U.S. Treasuries, the local Treasury bonds, and the long end bonds. The yields are around 6.2 levels, and that is still near the upper part of the cycle. So it's for big funds, whenever there are volatilities in the markets locally and globally. So these are these are the one of the surest way for them to earn, in the sense that if they hold on till maturity, they're insulated from market risks.
Right.
But if they don't intend to hold it till maturity, then they're exposed to the fluctuations in the yield. So there's
All right.
market risk. But at least there's that flexibility in fixed income. It's one of the safest from a credit
Sure.
perspective, and they tend to also earn while near the cycle highs. It's everything is cyclical, so near the cycle highs. So they are in a position to earn yield to maturity or interest rate returns.
Okay.
On one of the safest investments, and also other indicators like gold. Given the uncertainties, it benefited gold. It's up by about 15% already since the start
Right.
of the year.
Right.
It's just barely 3 months after gaining like 26% last year. So it's really the safe havens right now.
Okay.
Until the dust settles, then. But of course, it's opportunistic. Like in the PSCI, there's a good support at 6,000 or a little less than 6,000. By the way, it has been trading for for the past 13 years, a range of 6,000 to 7,000 on a year-end perspective. So there's the tendency to buy near 6,000, little less than that, and then some profit taking at say above 6,500, so towards 6,500 or 7,000. So that has been the usual tack.
So
And
it's
they
still
tend to-
cyclical. You still see it
Yeah.
as cyclical at this point.
Yes, and on top of that, they get also selective issues. They get to also earn on relatively higher
Do you have
dividend yield.
some stock picks?
If you look at how the markets perform, there were issues that defied the markets, like some of the rates, because the proposition there, we have seen a relatively higher dividend yields, and their prices have been relatively fairly resilient. The biggest REITs, real estate investment trusts, and of course the some of the biggest utilities also, because it's a global thing.
I'm seeing that for sure.
Because of AI, there's this large demand for electricity, both renewable, especially renewables. So it's really benefiting the likes of utilities.
Would you put
they've
your
defied.
money in IPOs, Mike?
Well, it depends. It depends on the industry where they belong. Because there are cyclical issues that follow the broader index, and there are issues that are kind of resilient, that they're defying. There are many factors to consider, like competition, the industry that they're in, the dividend yields. Of course, it's really like that. Especially during these times when investors are kind of defensive, on a defensive mode, and try to also see the fundamentals of those industries that would also outperform
Mike?
despite the challenges because of the trade wars and the tariffs.
As a final question, perhaps, and probably a good way to end, the Bangko Sentral, of course, anticipates a wider balance of payments deficit due to a slower global trade and subdued investor confidence. Are there strategies that you would recommend that the Philippines adopt or consider to mitigate these risks?
So far, Rain, if you look at it well, the Philippines is kind of hedged because the big story. Well, that's consistent with our previous discussions. With the higher U.S. import tariffs, the protectionist policies, that would slow down world GDP growth. That would slow down global trade. That would slow down investments worldwide because of the protectionist stance, the America First policies. As much as possible, Trump would like to create as many jobs as possible, try to attract as many investments in the U.S. as possible. We have been already hearing the likes of TCMC, the like of Hyundai. They're investing billions in billions in the U.S. So that would be the stance. And if given that if there would be some slowdown in world GDP growth, so yeah, how to hedge that? The hardest hit, not only in terms of industries, but even by countries, those that are dependent on global trade would be more vulnerable to slow down. Well, the Philippines is not that export dependent compared to its other Asian and ASEAN neighbors. So that's because we don't export a lot of merchandise or goods, but we're kind of hedged because we have OFWs. Our greatest resources are people. OFW remittances, we're number 4 in the world, about $40 billion based on World Bank data. After India, Mexico, and China. So not everybody has that in the ASEAN and the Asian neighborhood. Number 2, we have BPOs. We're number 2 in the world after India. Our BPO industry is earning more than $39 billion per year. So we're kind of insulated. Good thing, on services, it's not much of an issue. It's really on merchandise or goods trade that's affected by this tariff. So we're kind of insulated, so to speak.
And we now come full circle. We've been talking about we started with remittances, and we're still going to end with remittances, as well as perhaps even the digital economy. Now, it's clear, obviously, from our discussion that remittances serve as a cornerstone of the Philippine economy. Maintaining their stability requires careful consideration of both domestic policies and international developments. Michael Ricafort, Chief Economist at RCBC, always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on these critical issues. Thank you so much. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much, Rain, and your viewers, and have a pleasant afternoon.
Great afternoon to you too. And that is it for today's Follow the Money. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, always on top.